Don't even think about moving, lady. Keep your hands up and stay right there, Officer Griggs barked as 10 police cruisers screeched to a stop around Angela Brooks, trapping her in a tight circle in the middle of the street, outside her own home, while officers jumped out with weapons drawn like they were cornering a violent criminal. Red and blue lights flashed across her face as boots pounded the pavement around her, the engines of the cruisers rumbling while officers barked orders like she didn't belong on the very street she lived on. Angela didn't argue. She didn't shout. Slowly, with every officer watching, she reached into her pocket and lifted her phone to her ear. In the middle of that circle of flashing lights and drawn weapons, she made one quiet call, while the officers surrounding her had absolutely no idea who was about to answer. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The last rays of sunlight painted long shadows across Brookside Street as Angela Brooks stepped out of her front door. The evening air felt heavy with late summer humidity, and crickets were just beginning their nightly chorus. She glanced across the street at Mrs. Carter's small white house, noticing the porch light wasn't on yet. The elderly widow sometimes forgot to turn it on before dark. Angela had just reached her mailbox when the first siren split the quiet evening. Within seconds, more joined in a deafening chorus. The peaceful street transformed as police cruisers converged from both directions, tires screeching against asphalt. Blue and red emergency lights strobed across house fronts and trees. "What in the world?" Angela whispered, her army training kicking in as she assessed the situation. 10 police cars skidded to a stop, forming a tight circle around her. Car doors flew open, and officers poured out, weapons drawn and aimed directly at her. "Hands where we can see them! Do it now!" an officer shouted. Angela slowly raised both hands, her heartbeat steady despite the chaos. She'd faced worse in combat zones. This was her street, her home, and she refused to let fear take control. Officer Tyler Griggs stepped forward, his face twisted with unnecessary aggression. His hand gripped his weapon so tight his knuckles showed white. "Don't move! You're suspected of harboring a dangerous fugitive." "There must be some mistake," Angela said calmly, keeping her voice level. "I live here. I'm just checking on my neighbor." "Shut up," Griggs snapped. "Nobody gave you permission to speak." Movement caught Angela's eye as curtains twitched in nearby windows. The Martinez family across the street stood on their porch, phones raised to record everything. Mrs. Thompson from next door watched through her living room window, hand pressed to her mouth in shock. The officers tightened their circle. Angela counted 15 of them, all with weapons trained on her. The situation felt wrong, too coordinated, too aggressive for a simple fugitive check. A black SUV pulled up, and Captain Darren Holt emerged. He adjusted his uniform jacket as he approached, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Angela recognized that smile. It was the same one bullies wore when they thought they had the upper hand. "Ms. Brooks," Holt said, his voice carrying across the street, "we have credible information that you're hiding a dangerous criminal. Step aside. We're searching your house." "Do you have a warrant, Captain Holt?" Angela asked, still not lowering her hands. "Probable cause," he replied smoothly. "Officer Griggs, secure the subject." Griggs moved forward eagerly, grabbing Angela's arm with unnecessary force. His fingers dug into her skin as he twisted her wrist. "That's assault, Officer Griggs," Angela stated clearly, making sure the neighbors filming could hear. "I'm not resisting, and you're hurting me intentionally." "I said shut up." Griggs yanked harder, trying to provoke a reaction. Angela noticed more neighbors gathering. The Wilsons had joined the Martinez family. Even teenage Jimmy Parker was filming from his second-story window. Good. The more witnesses, the better. 2 officers headed toward her front door, while others spread out to cover the perimeter. Angela watched as they prepared to enter her home without showing any paperwork or legal justification. "I do not consent to any searches," she announced firmly. "I want every officer's name and badge number, and I'm invoking my right to legal representation." Captain Holt stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "You're in no position to make demands. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Angela felt Griggs's grip tighten further, but she kept her face neutral. They were trying to provoke her, to justify escalating the situation. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. With her free hand, she slowly reached toward her pocket. Several officers tensed, but she moved deliberately to show she wasn't a threat. "I'm taking out my phone," she announced clearly. "I'm going to make a call to my husband." Griggs snickered. "Oh, you're calling your husband? We're so scared." Other officers joined in the laughter, but Angela ignored them as she calmly dialed. The phone rang twice before Marcus answered. "Marcus," she said steadily, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. 10 cruisers, no warrant. Captain Holt is here." The laughter died as they heard the steel in her voice. Angela noticed Captain Holt's smile falter slightly. Marcus's voice came through clear and controlled. "Stay calm. Don't say another word. I'm handling this." Angela lowered the phone, but kept the line open. She met Captain Holt's gaze directly, saying nothing. The silence stretched as red and blue lights continued to paint the darkening street. In the distance, a dog barked, and somewhere, a screen door slammed. They had intended to intimidate her with this show of force. Instead, they had given her exactly what she needed: witnesses, evidence, and a direct line to someone who knew exactly how to fight back. Angela stood perfectly still in Officer Griggs's painful grip, waiting. Sometimes the strongest response was simply refusing to be afraid. The night air crackled with tension as Angela held the phone steady, Marcus's steady breathing audible on the line. Officer Griggs's fingers still dug into her arm, but she refused to show any discomfort. The circle of police cruisers cast alternating red and blue shadows across the scene, their emergency lights painting everything in harsh, unnatural colors. "Your husband gonna come save you?" Officer Griggs sneered, yanking her arm again. "Maybe he can phone in some backup from his little boat." Several officers chuckled, but Angela noticed their laughter seemed forced, uncertain. She kept the phone line open, making sure Marcus could hear everything. Captain Holt stepped closer, his polished shoes crunching on the asphalt. "Mrs. Brooks, this theatrical display won't change anything," Holt said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We have probable cause, and we will search your property. Your phone call is just wasting everyone's time." Angela's voice remained steady as she spoke into the phone. "Marcus, they're insisting they have probable cause. Captain Holt is ordering a search without presenting any warrant or documentation." "These cowboys think they can do whatever they want," Marcus replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Don't let them bait you into reacting. I'm making calls right now. Just stay calm and keep that phone recording." More neighbors had gathered on their porches and lawns. The Martinez family had been joined by the Wilsons and the Thompsons. Angela counted at least 8 phones recording the scene. Mrs. Carter had finally emerged from her house, her small frame trembling as she watched from her porch steps. "Get that house open," Captain Holt barked at 2 officers near Angela's front door. They moved forward, one of them already reaching for the doorknob. "I do not consent to any search of my property," Angela announced clearly, making sure her voice carried to all the recording phones. "You have not presented a warrant or any documentation of probable cause." Officer Griggs suddenly shoved her forward, causing her to stumble. "Shut your mouth! You don't give orders here!" Angela regained her balance, but didn't resist. She kept her movements slow and controlled, even as her shoulder ached from Griggs's rough handling. Through the phone, she heard Marcus speaking rapidly to someone else, his voice clipped and professional. "Did everyone see that?" called out Mr. Martinez from across the street. "He just assaulted her for no reason. She's not even resisting." "Mind your own business," another officer shouted back. "Clear the area." "Everyone back inside their homes?" Nobody moved. Instead, more neighbors emerged, drawn by the commotion. The yellow porch lights clicked on one by one, illuminating the growing crowd of witnesses. Angela heard the distinctive sound of social media notifications as people began sharing the videos in real time. "Marcus," Angela spoke into the phone again, her voice carrying clearly in the tense atmosphere. "They're about to enter the house. Officer Griggs has physically assaulted me twice now. Captain Holt is directing everything." "Keep that phone recording," Marcus replied. "I've got JAG lawyers conferencing in right now. They're pulling up your property's federal status." Captain Holt signaled to the officers at the door. "Enough of this circus. Get that door open and clear the house." "Sir," one of the younger officers called out. "Shouldn't we wait for the warrant?" "I said clear that house," Holt snapped, his composure cracking slightly. "This is a time-sensitive operation." Angela noticed a subtle shift in the other officers' postures. Several exchanged uncertain glances. They could feel the situation spiraling beyond their control, with too many witnesses and too many cameras recording their actions. The sound of a door being forced open cracked through the night air. Angela turned to see two officers disappearing into her house, flashlight beams dancing across her living room walls through the windows. "Marcus, they've entered the house," Angela reported calmly. "No warrant, no documentation, forced entry." "Perfect," Marcus replied, and Angela detected a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Keep narrating everything you see. JAG's got the property records pulled up. They're conferencing with the Pentagon legal office right now." Officer Griggs tightened his grip again, trying to provoke a reaction. "Your husband can call whoever he wants. Won't change anything happening right here, right now." Angela ignored him, keeping her attention on Captain Holt. The police captain's earlier smugness had developed a brittle edge. He kept glancing at the growing crowd of neighbors, at all those recording phones pointed in his direction. "Captain," Angela said, her voice clear and professional, "I need to inform you that this property falls under federal military housing protection due to my husband's classified status and assignments. Unauthorized entry could constitute a federal offense." Holt's face tightened. "You expect me to believe that? This is local jurisdiction, Mrs. Brooks. Your husband's job doesn't change that. Check it yourself," Angela replied calmly. The property's federal status was updated last year. Every officer who entered that house without proper authorization could face serious consequences. A murmur ran through the crowd of neighbors. Someone whistled low and long. Angela noticed several officers shifting uncomfortably, their earlier confidence evaporating as the situation grew more complicated. The two officers brushed past Angela, their boots heavy on her front walkway. She moved to block their path, her army training kicking in as she planted her feet. "You are not authorized to enter this property," she said firmly. Officer Griggs grabbed her arm from behind. Another officer seized her other arm. Before she could brace herself, they yanked her backwards. Angela's feet left the ground for a moment before she slammed hard onto the pavement. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. Her phone clattered away, skidding across the asphalt. "Stop resisting!" Griggs shouted, though Angela hadn't moved. He drove his knee into her back, grinding her chest against the rough pavement. "She's not resisting," Mrs. Carter cried out from her porch. "Leave her alone!" Angela could barely breathe with Griggs's weight crushing her. She turned her head to the side, cheek scraping on the ground. Through the forest of police boots surrounding her, she saw neighbors surging forward, phones raised high. "Back up! Everyone back up!" officers shouted, forming a barrier between the crowd and Angela. The sound of breaking wood echoed from inside her house. Angela tried to lift her head, but Griggs shoved it back down. She heard drawers being yanked open, furniture scraping across floors, objects crashing. "They're destroying her house!" someone yelled from the crowd. "This is wrong! This is what happens when you harbor criminals!" Captain Holt's voice boomed over the chaos. He paced in front of the gathered neighbors like a preacher delivering a sermon. "We have reliable intelligence that a violent fugitive has been seen entering and exiting this residence." Angela's mind raced, even as Griggs roughly twisted her arms behind her back. A violent fugitive? She knew every person who had visited her home in the past month. Something wasn't adding up. The metallic bite of handcuffs cut into her wrists as Griggs ratcheted them too tight. Inside her house, the destruction continued. She heard picture frames shattering, the dining room chairs toppling. "Captain," a voice called from inside. No sign of the suspect in the main rooms. Moving to the basement. "Keep searching," Holt ordered. "He's here somewhere. Check every corner, every closet." Angela's thoughts whirled. What suspect? Who were they supposedly looking for? She managed to turn her head enough to see her phone lying a few feet away. The call to Marcus still active. More crashes from inside. The sound of her kitchen cabinets being emptied onto the floor. Upstairs, footsteps thundered across the ceiling as officers moved room to room. "Get her up," Holt commanded. Griggs and another officer hauled Angela to her feet. Her legs trembled, shoulders screaming from the awkward position of her cuffed hands. She could feel blood trickling from her scraped cheek. "Who exactly are you looking for?" Angela demanded, finding her voice. "What's the name of this supposed fugitive?" Holt's face tightened. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "You know exactly who we're after, Mrs. Brooks. Don't play innocent." "No, I don't know," Angela shot back. "Because there is no fugitive, is there? This is something else entirely." A vein pulsed in Holt's temple. "Watch your mouth. You're already facing charges for obstruction and resisting arrest." "Resisting what arrest? You never even told me I was under arrest. You never read me my rights." More shouts from inside the house. The sound of her mattress being flipped off the bed frame. Books swept off shelves. Photo albums dumped onto the floor. Through her phone's speaker, she could hear Marcus talking rapidly to someone. "Yes, sir. My wife is being physically detained while officers conduct an illegal search. I need immediate intervention." "Yes, sir. I understand. I'm booking a flight now." Officer Griggs yanked Angela's arms higher behind her back, making her gasp in pain. "Your husband better hurry home. Might not have much of a house left to come back to." The neighbors' angry shouts grew louder. Angela saw Mr. Wilson trying to push past the police line, his teenage sons holding him back. Mrs. Martinez was crying, clutching her phone as she recorded everything. The Thompson kids huddled behind their parents, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Nothing in the basement," an officer reported, emerging from the house. His boots tracked mud across Angela's welcome mat. "No sign of forced entry or hiding spots." "Keep looking," Holt snapped. "Every inch of this property gets searched. Pull up the floorboards if you have to." Angela's legs threatened to buckle. The handcuffs bit deeper into her wrists with every small movement. Her shoulders burned from the unnatural position, but she refused to show weakness in front of Holt. "This is illegal," she stated clearly, making sure her voice carried to all the recording phones. "You have no warrant, no probable cause, and no evidence of any fugitive. You're violating multiple federal laws by forcibly entering a protected military residence." "Shut her up," Holt ordered. Griggs started dragging Angela toward a police cruiser. She planted her feet, forcing him to physically lift her. As they struggled, Angela noticed something strange. Several officers had stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to Mrs. Carter's house next door. Following their gaze, Angela saw the setting sun reflecting off Mrs. Carter's windows. The small, well-maintained home stood in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in Angela's yard. Officers kept glancing between Captain Holt and Mrs. Carter's property with uncertain expressions. Mrs. Carter herself still stood on her porch steps, hands clasped tightly together. Her face was a mask of worry as she watched Angela being manhandled by the police. But there was something else in the elderly woman's expression, a deep, weary knowledge that made Angela's suspicions crystallize. The pieces clicked together in Angela's mind as she watched the officers' furtive glances toward Mrs. Carter's house. For months, neighbors had whispered about aggressive real estate agents pressuring people to sell. Mrs. Carter mentioned receiving daily calls about her property, each offer more insistent than the last. "This isn't about any fugitive," Angela said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "This is about Mrs. Carter's house, isn't it, Captain?" Holt's expression darkened. He strode over and grabbed Angela's arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "I said shut up." "The development company wants this whole block," Angela continued, ignoring the pain. "But Mrs. Carter won't sell, so now you're trying to scare everyone into leaving." "Get her in the car," Holt ordered through clenched teeth. Griggs yanked Angela backward, but she planted her feet. "That's why you've been harassing our neighborhood. The random traffic stops, the noise complaints, the parking tickets. You're working for the developers." The crowd of neighbors stirred. Angela saw recognition dawn on their faces as they connected the dots. Mr. Wilson shouted, "Is that true? You're trying to force us out?" Mrs. Martinez pushed forward. "My brother got arrested last month for suspicious behavior in his own yard. Was that part of this too?" Holt raised his hands, trying to calm the growing anger. "These are baseless accusations from a woman who's clearly unstable. She's interfering with a legitimate police operation." "What operation?" Angela challenged. "You haven't found anything because there's nothing to find. This whole thing is a show of force to intimidate us." Mrs. Carter's voice cut through the tension. "They offered me triple market value last week." Her words carried across the yard, steady and clear. "When I refused, a police officer came by to inspect my property for code violations." More neighbors began sharing stories. "They towed my car for being 2 inches over the curb. My son got detained for sitting on our own porch. They shut down my home business over permit issues." Holt moved closer to Angela, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You think you're clever? You think exposing this changes anything? We own this neighborhood. Your little rebellion ends tonight." "You don't own anything," Angela replied, matching his quiet tone. "And after this, everyone knows exactly what you are." The captain's face flushed with rage. He spun toward his officers. "This woman is under arrest for obstruction of justice and inciting civil unrest. Get her out of here now." Griggs and another officer dragged Angela toward the nearest patrol car. She didn't resist, keeping her voice steady as she called out, "Mrs. Carter, don't let them intimidate you. Everyone, keep recording. Don't let them delete the videos. Your phones will be confiscated as evidence," Holt announced to the crowd. "Anyone who refuses to comply will be arrested for interfering with a police investigation." But the damage was done. Neighbors were already streaming live on social media, texting videos to friends and family outside the neighborhood. Angela saw Mrs. Thompson hurriedly typing on her phone, probably uploading footage to cloud storage where it couldn't be erased. The officers shoved Angela into the back of the patrol car. Through the window, she watched Holt trying to regain control of the situation. He was ordering people back into their homes, threatening arrests, but the crowd held their ground. The neighborhood's fear was transforming into determination. Angela's phone still lay on the pavement, where it had fallen. Through the car window, she could faintly hear Marcus's voice coming from the speaker. He was talking to someone about federal jurisdiction and civil rights violations. Holt noticed the phone, too. He walked over and deliberately crushed it under his boot heel. The screen shattered, cutting off Marcus's voice. The captain stared directly at Angela through the patrol car window, his message clear. Her connection to help was severed. But Angela knew better. Miles away, Marcus was already boarding a plane, armed with military contacts and legal resources that Holt couldn't imagine. Her husband understood that this wasn't just about one corrupt police captain. It was about standing up to systemic intimidation. Mrs. Carter approached the patrol car, ignoring officers' warnings to stay back. She pressed her hand against the window, her eyes meeting Angela's. The elderly woman's face showed no fear now, only resolve. She nodded once, a silent promise that she wouldn't give in. "Clear the street!" Holt shouted. "Anyone still out here in 5 minutes goes to jail." The neighbors moved back slowly, phones still recording. They formed a line along the sidewalk, a wall of witnesses that wouldn't be intimidated into silence. Angela saw young Tommy Wilson, only 12 years old, slip away from the crowd. He ran toward other houses, probably to warn residents who hadn't come outside yet. Officer Griggs slid into the driver's seat of the patrol car. "You really stepped in it this time," he sneered at Angela through the cage partition. "Captain Holt's going to make sure you regret this." "No," Angela replied calmly. "He's going to regret showing everyone exactly who he is." The patrol car's engine rumbled to life. Through the windows, Angela watched her neighborhood grow smaller. The flashing lights, the gathered crowds, Mrs. Carter still standing firm on her porch. But she felt no fear. Instead, a steady determination filled her chest. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Inside the holding cell, Angela sat perfectly straight on the metal bench, her military training evident in her rigid posture. The harsh, fluorescent lights cast unflattering shadows across the concrete walls. Her wrists still bore red marks from the overly tight handcuffs, and her shoulder ached where Officer Griggs had roughly shoved her into the patrol car. 2 female officers had already searched her, confiscating her jewelry, shoelaces, and even the hair tie that kept her neat braids in place. Now, loose strands fell around her face, but she refused to show any sign of discomfort or attempt to fix them. Officer Griggs appeared at the cell bars, smirking. "Comfortable in there, Mrs. Brooks? Hope you like the accommodation. You might be staying a while." Angela kept her eyes forward, maintaining her composure. Years of combat medical training had taught her that reaction only encouraged aggressors. "What's wrong?" Griggs taunted. "Not so talkative now without your audience of neighbors?" He rattled the cell bars with his baton. "Captain Holt's building quite a case against you. Obstruction, resisting arrest, inciting civil unrest, could be looking at serious time." Down the corridor, she heard Captain Holt's voice speaking to someone. "Make sure those phone videos are secured as evidence. We can't have people spreading misleading footage that could compromise our investigation." Angela's jaw tightened. She knew exactly what would happen to that footage. It would conveniently disappear, just like other evidence of police misconduct in the past. Meanwhile, Marcus's plane touched down at Reynolds Regional Airport, 30 miles from Brookside Street. He moved with purposeful efficiency through the terminal, already on his phone. "Listen carefully, Jack," he said to his journalist contact at the Metro Daily. "I'm sending you documents about Vision Heights Development Company. They've been buying up properties in working-class neighborhoods, using questionable tactics. I need you to dig into their connection to the police department, specifically Captain Darren Holt." Marcus climbed into his rental car, Bluetooth connecting automatically. "Yes, I'm sure. My wife just got arrested for interfering with their latest land grab. Time to shine some light on this operation." His next call was to Commander Sarah Maxwell at the Judge Advocate General's office. "Sarah, I need everything you can find about police jurisdiction over military family housing." "Yes, it's urgent. They entered our property without a warrant." Back at the station, two detectives led Angela to an interrogation room. The younger one, Detective Phillips, tried to play good cop. "Look, Mrs. Brooks, we can make this easier. Just tell us about the fugitive, and maybe we can work something out." Angela focused on memorizing details instead of responding. The room number, 2B. The time on the wall clock, 10:47 p.m. The coffee stain on Phillips's tie. Every detail could matter later. The older detective, Martinez, slammed his hand on the table. "Your husband's military status won't help you here. This is local jurisdiction." Angela finally spoke, her voice steady. "I want my lawyer present for any questions." "Sure, waste everyone's time," Martinez growled. "Meanwhile, those charges keep piling up. Captain Holt's got witnesses saying you tried to turn the neighborhood against his officers." Angela noted the threat in his tone, the way he emphasized Holt's name. More details for later. On the highway, Marcus was still working his phone. His contact at the county records office had sent property documents showing recent sales around Brookside Street. The pattern was clear: homes purchased well below market value after owners reported police harassment. "Send me everything on Vision Heights board members," he told his investigator friend. "Tax records, political donations, business partnerships. If Holt's getting kickbacks, we'll find them." The holding cell felt colder when Angela returned. Officer Griggs had cranked up the air conditioning, a common tactic to make detainees uncomfortable. She noticed another woman in the cell across the corridor, shivering in a thin tank top. "Hey," Angela called softly to the woman. "You okay over there?" The woman looked up, revealing a bruised cheek. "They said I was loitering. Outside my own apartment. Let me guess. Vision Heights bought your building?" The woman's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Keep quiet in there." A guard banged his flashlight against the bars. Angela settled back against the wall, adding another piece to the puzzle. More residents being pushed out, more properties being cleared for development. Marcus's rental car ate up the final miles to the station. His phone buzzed with a message from Jack. "Found something big. Vision Heights CEO played golf with Holt last month at Crystal Lake Country Club. Members only. Holt's salary couldn't cover the dues. Download the club's financial records," Marcus texted back. "Follow the money." The station's parking lot came into view, harsh security lights creating pools of yellow illumination. Marcus pulled into a space, checking his watch. 11:58 p.m. He took a moment to center himself, remembering his SEAL training. Emotion wouldn't help Angela. Strategy would. He had the beginnings of evidence, legal resources ready to move, and a journalist eager to expose corruption. In her cell, Angela heard the front desk officer greeting someone. She didn't know it was Marcus, but she felt the shift in the air, the moment when the balance of power began to change. Marcus Brooks entered the police station at 12:07 a.m., his military bearing evident in his straight posture and measured steps. The front desk sergeant looked up from his computer, immediately noticing Marcus's confident demeanor. "I'm here to see my wife, Angela Brooks," Marcus stated firmly. "She was brought in earlier tonight on fabricated charges." The sergeant's expression shifted from bored to wary. "Sir, visiting hours are over. You'll need to come back in the morning. This isn't a visit. I'm here about an illegal arrest and unauthorized search of protected military family housing." Marcus's voice remained calm, but carried the weight of authority. "I want to speak with the commanding officer." "That would be Captain Holt," the sergeant replied, reaching for his phone. "Perfect. Tell him Marcus Brooks is here. Navy SEAL, currently assigned to Special Operations Command. He'll want to take this meeting." The sergeant's hand hesitated over the phone. "Sir, I don't think—" Make the call, Marcus insisted. Unless you want to explain to federal investigators why you obstructed an inquiry into civil rights violations. While the sergeant dialed, Marcus pulled out his own phone and called Diana Washington, a civil rights attorney he'd worked with before. Diana, sorry for the late hour. I need you at the Central District Station. They've arrested Angela on false charges and conducted an illegal search. He listened briefly. Yes, Captain Holt is involved. Looks like developer pressure on the neighborhood. The holding area door buzzed open. Officer Griggs emerged, his swagger less pronounced than earlier. Mr. Brooks, Griggs said stiffly. Captain Holt will see you shortly. Meanwhile, you can speak with your wife. Briefly. Marcus followed Griggs down the corridor, noting security camera positions and officer names. Every detail mattered when building a case. Angela sat upright in her cell, her expression brightening slightly when she saw Marcus. The bruises on her wrists made his jaw clench, but he maintained his composure. You okay? He asked quietly. I'm fine, Angela replied. But this isn't about me. They're after Mrs. Carter's house. The whole arrest was theater, trying to scare the neighborhood. Wrap it up, Griggs interrupted. Captain's waiting. Marcus touched Angela's hand through the bars. Diana's on her way. Hang tight. Captain Holt's office radiated authority. Polished desk, awards on the walls, American flag in the corner. But Marcus noticed the golf trophy from Crystal Lake Country Club displayed prominently. Another piece of evidence. Mr. Brooks, Holt said without standing, your wife was arrested for obstruction and inciting unrest. The charges are legitimate. Save it, Marcus replied, remaining standing. We both know this is about clearing properties for Vision Heights development. How much are they paying you to harass residents? Holt's face hardened. Careful, Mr. Brooks. Your military status doesn't give you license to make accusations. No, but evidence does. Marcus placed his phone on Holt's desk, displaying property records. Interesting pattern here. Police pressure, sudden sales, all going to Vision Heights at below market value. Pure coincidence, Holt dismissed, and completely irrelevant to your wife's arrest. We'll let the federal investigation determine that. Marcus leaned forward. Release Angela now, and maybe we can discuss dropping the civil rights lawsuit. Are you threatening me? Holt stood, attempting to use his height advantage. No threat, just facts. By morning, military investigators, civil rights attorneys, and journalists will be asking questions about Vision Heights' connection to this department. Your choice, how that plays out. Holt's confidence wavered slightly. Get out of my office. Your wife stays until processing is complete. Fine. Marcus turned to leave. But remember, you're not just fighting us anymore. The whole neighborhood is watching. Back in the corridor, Marcus called Jack at the Metro Daily. Need you to look into Crystal Lake Country Club. Specifically, who paid Captain Holt's membership dues. He passed Angela's cell again. Diana will be here within the hour. Don't answer any questions. Angela nodded. Be careful. Holt's desperate. That makes him dangerous. So am I, Marcus replied quietly. And I fight smarter. The night air felt heavy as Marcus exited the station. His phone buzzed with messages from military contacts and investigative reporters. The pieces were coming together, but they needed more. Dawn was breaking as he drove through the neighborhood. Construction survey markers dotted several front yards, small orange flags and spray-painted lines. They hadn't been there during the arrest. Marcus pulled over, studying the pattern. The markers surrounded homes owned by elderly residents or military families, the ones most vulnerable to pressure tactics. A sleepy-looking surveyor emerged from a truck, carrying more markers. Marcus watched him check a document, then plant flags around Mrs. Carter's property. Vision Heights was moving fast, confident their police pressure would clear the way. They didn't realize they'd just given Marcus more evidence of the coordinated scheme. He photographed the markers and the surveyor's truck, adding them to his growing file. Then he called Diana again. "Change of plans," he said. "Before you come to the station, I need you to file an emergency injunction. They're already marking properties for demolition without owner consent." The sun crept higher, casting long shadows across Brookside Street. Marcus knew the next few hours would determine whether Holt's corruption machine would continue or finally face justice. The morning sun cast long shadows across Mrs. Carter's front porch as Marcus knocked on her door at 7 a.m. The elderly woman opened it cautiously, her eyes tired but alert. "Mrs. Carter, I'm Marcus Brooks, Angela's husband." Relief softened her features. "Oh, thank goodness. Please come in. I've been so worried about Angela since they took her away." Inside, the house was immaculate. Photos of family lined the walls, furniture well-maintained from decades of care. Mrs. Carter led Marcus to her kitchen table, where scattered papers and letters covered the surface. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked, already reaching for a mug. "Yes, thank you." Marcus settled into a chair, noticing official letterheads among the papers. "Mrs. Carter, I need to understand what's been happening in the neighborhood. Angela mentioned police pressure to sell homes?" Mrs. Carter's hands trembled slightly as she poured the coffee. "It started 6 months ago. First, they came to the Williams family down the street. Police cars, late-night visits, noise complaints, all made up. Within 2 weeks, the Williams sold their house for half its value." She sat down, pushing several letters toward Marcus. "Then they started on others. The Jacksons got tired of being pulled over every time they left their driveway. The Petersons couldn't take the constant anonymous tips about drug activity. Everyone who sold got the same offer from Vision Heights Development." Marcus examined the letters. Official notices of code violations, police reports, and finally, lowball offers from the developer. The pattern was obvious. 3 days ago, Mrs. Carter continued, her voice stronger now, "Captain Holt himself came to my door. Said he'd hate to see an elderly widow like me have trouble with the law. That's when Angela started checking on me every day." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Did Holt mention the developer?" "Not directly. But the Vision Heights representative arrived an hour later with papers, talking about how unsafe the neighborhood was becoming." She straightened in her chair. "This is my home. My Herbert and I built our life here. I won't be bullied out of it." Marcus pulled out his phone, photographing each document. "May I take these? My lawyer needs to see the pattern." "Take whatever helps." Mrs. Carter stood and walked to a desk drawer. "I have more. The Robinson family left copies of everything before they moved. Said someone needed to keep proof." For the next hour, Marcus sorted through papers, building a timeline. Property records showed Vision Heights buying homes at 40% below market value, always within days of police incidents. His phone buzzed. A text from Diana, Washington. "Angela's arraignment at 11 a.m. Judge Matthews presiding." Marcus checked his watch. 8:45 a.m. "Mrs. Carter, I need to get to the courthouse. Will you be okay?" "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "Tell Angela we're all praying for her." At the courthouse, Marcus found Diana waiting outside courtroom C. Her expression was grim. "It's worse than we thought," she said quietly. "Matthews and Holt golfed together at Crystal Lake. He's already denied 3 of my motions this morning." Inside, the courtroom felt heavy with tension. Angela sat straight-backed at the defendant's table, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Captain Holt lounged in the front row, smirking. Judge Matthews entered, barely glancing at the defense table. "Case number 2547, State versus Brooks. Charges of obstruction and inciting civil unrest." Diana stood. "Your Honor, my client is a respected community member with no prior record. We request release on her own recognizance." "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. The defendant actively resisted officers and encouraged others to interfere with police business. She remains a threat to public order. Matthews nodded. Agreed. Bail is set at $500,000. Marcus felt his fists clench. The amount was astronomical for misdemeanor charges, clearly meant to keep Angela locked up. Your Honor, Diana protested, that amount is punitive and— That's my ruling, Counselor. Matthews banged his gavel. Next case. Officers led Angela toward the holding area. She caught Marcus's eye, her expression determined despite everything. In the courthouse hallway, Diana was already making calls. We'll appeal the bail amount, but it could take days. They're using the system to wear her down. Marcus watched Holt stride past, speaking quietly into his phone. Everything about this felt calculated, orchestrated. I need to make a call, he told Diana. Keep pushing the appeal. Outside, Marcus dialed Jack Morrison at the Metro Daily. The journalist had covered police corruption before and wasn't afraid of powerful enemies. Jack, it's Marcus Brooks. Remember that story you wrote about developer kickbacks last year? I've got something bigger. I'm listening. Jack's voice held cautious interest. Vision Heights development, Crystal Lake Country Club, and a police captain using his badge to force property sales. I've got documents showing the pattern, plus witness statements about police harassment. Serious allegations, Jack said. A lot of important people involved in Vision Heights. That's why it needs to come out. They're holding my wife on ridiculous bail while they try to clear the neighborhood. A pause. Get me solid proof connecting Holt to the developer payoffs, and I'll run the story. But it has to be bulletproof. Documents, recordings, money trail. These people have expensive lawyers. Give me 48 hours, Marcus replied. I'll show you how deep this goes. Marcus, Jack added, be careful. Last reporter who looked into Vision Heights had his brake lines cut. Ruled an accident, of course. Just be ready to move when I call, Marcus said, ending the call. Marcus sat in the back booth of Joey's diner, far from windows and security cameras. The lunch crowd had thinned, leaving only a few regulars at the counter. Daniel Reeves arrived right on time, sliding into the opposite seat with a worn leather messenger bag. Thanks for meeting me, Marcus said quietly. Daniel pulled out a laptop and several folders. Jack Morrison vouched for you. Said this involves Captain Holt and Vision Heights. My wife's in jail because she got in their way. Marcus spread out Mrs. Carter's documents. They're systematically forcing people out of Brookside Street. Daniel studied the papers, his expression growing darker. These harassment patterns match complaints I've heard from other neighborhoods. Vision Heights shows up wherever Holt's officers target residents. A waitress approached, but Daniel waved her away. He opened his laptop, pulling up spreadsheets and property records. Look at this. In the past 18 months, Vision Heights bought 36 homes in 3 different districts. Every sale followed multiple police incidents. They're working together, Marcus said, using badges to drive down property values. It gets worse. Daniel lowered his voice. 2 homeowners who refused to sell had accidents. 1 garage fire, 1 car crash. Nothing proven, but the timing was convenient. Marcus felt cold anger settling in his chest. We need proof that connects Holt directly. That's the hard part. He's careful. Daniel pulled up more files. But there are patterns. Every time Vision Heights closes a group of properties, someone makes large cash deposits to an offshore account. The amounts match standard kickback percentages. The diner's door chimed. A woman in plain clothes entered, scanning the room before walking to their booth. Marcus tensed until Daniel nodded slightly. Detective Delgado, she said quietly, sliding in next to Daniel. We need to talk. Rosa Delgado looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. She glanced at the scattered papers. I see you're connecting dots. Can you help? Marcus asked. Not officially. She pushed a coffee cup aside. Internal Affairs has received dozens of complaints about Holt's tactics. They disappear into his personnel file, marked unfounded. He's got protection somewhere high up. But you're talking to us, Daniel noted. Delgado's expression hardened. I've watched him turn the department into his personal enforcement squad. Good officers either fall in line or get pushed out. Nobody can prove anything. My wife's sitting in jail because of his scheme, Marcus said. I know. I saw the booking report. Delgado leaned forward. Listen carefully. I can't openly help, but hypothetically, officers' body cameras upload footage to a secure server. Backups are automatically generated. If someone knew where to look, they might find interesting conversations about property deals. Daniel was already typing notes. Hypothetically, where would these backups be stored? I couldn't say. But the IT department recently upgraded their system. The old servers are in the basement storage room. Technically, they're scheduled for disposal next week. She stood. I need to go. Keep digging, but watch your backs. Holt doesn't play fair. After she left, Daniel turned to Marcus. We need those servers. Leave that to me. What about the money trail? I've got contacts at 3 banks. Give me a few hours. Daniel packed his bag. Meet me at my office tonight. Bring whatever you find. Marcus spent the afternoon following paper trails. He visited the county records office, reviewing every Vision Heights purchase. Property values dropped an average of 60% after police incidents began. The developer always closed deals within days of owners giving up. He called the jail but couldn't reach Angela. The guards claimed she was unavailable. His anger grew with each dead end and blocked call. At 4 o'clock, his phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Found something. Major deposits to Cayman account after each property cluster sells. Account traced to shell company. Director's name matches Holt's brother-in-law. Marcus drove to the newspaper office downtown. Daniel's workspace looked like a conspiracy theorist's dream. Walls covered with photos, documents, and connecting strings. 3 computer monitors displayed financial records and property maps. Look at this. Daniel pointed to a complex diagram. Vision Heights is owned by Crown Properties. Crown is owned by Phoenix Ventures. Phoenix's board includes James Holt, the captain's brother-in-law. Every time they close deals, James deposits exact percentages into this offshore account. Can we prove the money goes to Holt? That's our smoking gun. Daniel pulled up bank records. Monthly transfers from the Cayman account to a local bank. Destination is a numbered account. But look at the signature card. Marcus studied the document. The account holder's signature matched Holt's perfectly. 3 years of payments, Daniel continued, always within days of property closings. Total amount over $2 million. Marcus photographed everything with his phone. This is what we needed. But we still need proof he's directing the police harassment. Working on that too. Daniel handed him a thumb drive. Anonymous source sent video clips. Officers discussing property values during raids. Holt meeting with developers in parking garages. It's all circumstantial alone, but combined with the money trail. Marcus pocketed the drive. I need copies of everything. Bank records, property documents, corporate filings, anything linking Holt to Vision Heights. Already done. Daniel patted a thick envelope. 3 copies, stored in different locations. If anything happens to either of us, this still comes out. What about Angela's case? The financial evidence proves Holt's motive for targeting your street. Mrs. Carter's property is the last piece they need. Once this breaks, the charges against Angela won't stand. Marcus gathered the documents, his determination hardening into resolve. The pieces were finally coming together. Now they just needed to survive long enough to expose everything. Marcus carried the thick envelope of evidence through the double doors of police headquarters. The Internal Affairs Office occupied a quiet corner of the third floor, far from regular department operations. Two investigators looked up from their desks as he entered. "I'm Marcus Brooks. I have information about Captain Darren Holt." The senior investigator, Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins, gestured to a chair. Her partner, Detective Mike Torres, closed the office door. "We've heard rumors about Captain Holt for years," Jenkins said, opening the envelope. "But nothing concrete ever surfaced." Marcus spread out the bank records and property documents across her desk. "This connects Holt directly to Vision Heights development. They're using police harassment to force property sales. The money trail proves everything." Torres studied the financial records. "These offshore accounts, the timing matches perfectly with property acquisitions. There's more." Marcus handed over Daniel's thumb drive. "Video evidence of Holt coordinating with developers. Body camera footage showing targeted harassment of homeowners who refused to sell." Jenkins reviewed the materials carefully, her expression growing more serious with each document. "This is the kind of evidence we've been waiting for. Names, dates, dollar amounts, all documented." "My wife is in jail because she got in their way," Marcus said. "They're trying to force our elderly neighbor to sell her home." "We'll open a full corruption investigation immediately," Jenkins assured him. "This level of evidence demands action. We'll need statements from affected residents." "They're ready to talk. The whole neighborhood has witnessed Holt's tactics." Torres made copies of everything while Jenkins typed rapidly on her computer. "I'm filing the official investigation notice now. This triggers automatic protections for witnesses and evidence." Marcus watched them work, feeling cautiously hopeful. "What about my wife?" "I'll contact the district attorney's office," Jenkins said. "These documents prove Angela was targeted as part of a criminal conspiracy. The charges should be dropped." 2 hours later, Marcus stood outside the county jail. His military legal team had already arranged Angela's release on bail. The heavy metal doors opened with a buzz. Angela walked out, looking tired but unbroken. "Marcus," she fell into his embrace. He held her tightly. "Let's go home." The drive back to Brookside Street was quiet. Angela stared out the window, processing everything that had happened. Marcus explained about the evidence and internal affairs investigation. "You really found proof?" she asked. "Bank records, videos, corporate documents, everything connecting Holt to Vision Heights." Jenkins said it's enough for criminal charges. Angela squeezed his hand. "I knew you'd figure it out." They pulled into their driveway. The house still showed signs of the police search: scattered papers, overturned furniture, damaged doors. But neighbors had tried to clean up what they could. Mrs. Carter hurried over from next door. "Angela! Thank God you're home!" The elderly woman hugged her fiercely. "We've all been so worried." Other neighbors emerged from their homes, gathering on porches and sidewalks. Someone started clapping. Soon, the whole street joined in, celebrating Angela's return. "You showed them what this neighborhood is made of," Mr. Patterson called from his front steps. "We're not letting them push us around anymore," added Mrs. Rodriguez, who had brought over a casserole. Inside, Marcus and Angela worked together, straightening up their home. The physical labor helped release some of their tension. "I kept thinking about you in that cell," Marcus said, writing a bookshelf. "I kept thinking about Mrs. Carter," Angela replied. "They would have gone after her next if we hadn't stopped them." They ate Mrs. Rodriguez's casserole at their kitchen table, almost feeling normal again. The street was peaceful as sunset faded into evening. Neighbors dropped by with food and support, sharing stories of their own run-ins with Holt's officers. "Internal Affairs has everything they need," Marcus assured everyone. Jenkins said they're moving quickly on the investigation. Around 10 o'clock, the last visitors headed home. Angela showered away the jail's lingering feel, while Marcus secured the house. They were finally alone, able to really talk about everything. "I was so scared for you," Marcus admitted, holding her close. "I knew you'd find a way to expose them." Angela traced the familiar planes of his face. But it's not over, is it? No. The investigation could take months. Holt will fight back. At least now people know the truth. The neighborhood isn't afraid anymore. They settled into bed, emotionally and physically exhausted. For the first time in days, they could rest, knowing they had solid evidence against Holt. The quiet street felt almost peaceful. Angela had just drifted off when harsh lights suddenly blazed through their windows. Marcus was instantly alert, moving to look outside. Red and blue emergency lights strobed across houses and trees. The familiar sound of multiple police engines growled in the darkness. "They're back," Angela whispered, joining him at the window. Police vehicles rolled down Brookside Street, their headlights cutting through the night. Neither of them spoke as they watched the cruisers approach. All their earlier relief evaporated into renewed tension. The vehicles moved slowly, deliberately, a clear message that this wasn't over. Their emergency lights painted the neighborhood in alternating crimson and sapphire, transforming the peaceful street into something ominous. The pounding on the front door shattered the midnight silence. Heavy fists hammered the wood with deliberate force, making the whole frame shudder. "Police! Open up now!" Captain Holt's voice boomed through the door. Angela and Marcus exchanged a quick look. They both knew this wasn't a legitimate police action. This was pure intimidation. "We have a warrant to search for illegal weapons," Holt shouted. "Open this door, or we'll break it down." Marcus moved toward the door, but Angela grabbed his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Film everything." She quickly started recording on her phone as Marcus opened the door. Captain Holt stood there, flanked by Officer Griggs and 4 other officers, all with hands on their weapons. "Step aside," Holt ordered, shoving past Marcus into the home. He thrust a paper at Angela. "Warrant. Anonymous tip about illegal weapons trafficking." "That's ridiculous, and you know it," Angela said, still filming. "I'm a former Army medic. Marcus is active duty Navy. We don't traffic weapons." "Shut that camera off," Officer Griggs snapped, reaching for Angela's phone. Marcus stepped between them. "Touch my wife, and you'll be facing federal charges." The officers spread through the house, pulling open drawers and cabinets with unnecessary force. Glass shattered as a framed photo hit the floor. The sounds of destruction echoed from every room. "You're going to pay for any damage," Marcus warned, following Captain Holt. Holt smirked. "File a complaint. See how far that gets you." In the living room, officers yanked books from shelves and dumped out storage boxes. Angela winced as they carelessly tossed aside her medical textbooks and veteran support group materials. "Check everything," Holt ordered. "Every hiding spot." Officer Griggs approached the display case containing Angela's military service medals, commendations, and unit photos. He reached for the glass door. "Don't touch those," Marcus said firmly, positioning himself in front of the case. "Move aside," Griggs demanded, shoving Marcus's shoulder. "Those are federal military honors. You have no right to disturb them." Griggs grabbed Marcus's arm roughly. "I said move!" The tension exploded. Marcus knocked Griggs's hand away as other officers rushed forward. They slammed Marcus against the wall, twisting his arms behind his back. "Stop it!" Angela shouted, still recording. "He's protecting legitimate military property." Holt watched with satisfaction as his officers wrestled with Marcus. "Resisting a police search? That's a serious offense." "This isn't a search," Marcus growled through gritted teeth. "This is harassment." The officers finally stepped back, leaving Marcus against the wall. His jaw was tight with controlled fury as Griggs triumphantly yanked open the display case. The glass door crashed to the floor, sending shards everywhere. Medals and photographs scattered across the carpet. Griggs kicked them aside carelessly as he pretended to search the case. Angela's Distinguished Service Medal skidded under the couch. "Oops," Griggs said with a mocking smile. Angela's hand shook as she kept filming, documenting every moment of senseless destruction. The house she'd worked so hard to make into a home was being systematically torn apart. In the kitchen, officers dumped out every cabinet and drawer. Food containers burst open on the floor, mixing with broken dishes. They pulled out appliances and flipped over furniture, claiming to search for hidden compartments. The bedroom was even worse. The mattress was slashed open, clothes were scattered everywhere, and personal items were carelessly broken. Angela's jewelry box, a gift from her grandmother, was dumped out and stomped on. "Finding any illegal weapons?" Marcus asked coldly, as Holt supervised the destruction. "Evening's not over," Holt replied. "But making a mess sure takes time, doesn't it?" For over an hour, the officers continued their search. They broke doors off hinges, punched holes in walls claiming to look for hidden spaces, and destroyed anything that looked meaningful to Angela and Marcus. Finally, Holt signaled his officers to finish up. "Looks like your anonymous tip didn't pan out tonight," he said, surveying the devastation with satisfaction. "But we'll be watching this house very carefully from now on." "Get out," Marcus ordered quietly. "What was that?" Griggs stepped forward aggressively. "He said get out," Angela repeated, still recording. "You've done enough damage." The officers filed out, leaving the front door hanging crookedly on broken hinges. Their police lights continued to flash outside, broadcasting the raid to the whole neighborhood. Holt paused in the doorway. "Better clean this place up. Never know when we might need to search again." He smiled coldly. "Shame about all the damage, but that's what happens when suspects resist." After the police finally drove away, Angela sank down in the destroyed living room. Broken glass crunched under her feet. The house she'd worked so hard to make beautiful was in ruins. Her military honors, symbols of her service and sacrifice, lay scattered and damaged on the floor. "He's going to get away with everything," she whispered, looking at the destruction around them. "The evidence, the investigation, none of it matters. Holt's showing us he can do whatever he wants." Marcus knelt beside her scattered medals, carefully gathering the symbols of her service. The Distinguished Service Medal was scratched from being kicked under the couch. The display case lay in pieces, just like their sense of security in their own home. Angela's phone was still recording as tears finally slid down her cheeks. Everything they'd built, everything they'd tried to protect, felt shattered beyond repair. In just one night, Holt had demonstrated exactly how much power he held, and how helpless they were to stop him. Sunlight streamed through the broken blinds as Angela and Marcus surveyed their destroyed home in the harsh morning light. The damage looked even worse than it had during the midnight raid. Shattered glass sparkled across the floor like cruel confetti. Slashed furniture stuffing drifted in the air every time they moved. "We should start with the kitchen," Angela said quietly, picking up a broom. Her hands still shook slightly as she gripped the handle. "At least make it functional enough to have coffee." Marcus nodded, gathering garbage bags for the broken dishes and food containers scattered across the floor. Neither of them had slept after the raid. Dark circles shadowed their eyes, but determination kept them moving. "I saved what I could of your medals," Marcus said, gesturing to the carefully arranged military honors on the coffee table. He'd spent hours collecting every piece, treating each one with the reverence it deserved. "We'll need a new display case." Angela paused her sweeping, staring at the bent and scratched medals. "They didn't have to destroy everything," she whispered. "This was pure spite." A soft knock at the door made them both tense. After last night, any unexpected visitor set their nerves on edge. Marcus moved protectively toward Angela as she peered through the cracked front window. Detective Rosa Delgado stood on their porch, constantly glancing over her shoulder. She wasn't in uniform, instead wearing civilian clothes and large sunglasses, despite the early hour. "Let her in," Angela said, recognizing the detective from their previous encounters at the station. Marcus opened the door cautiously, positioning himself between the detective and his wife. "I'm sorry about your house," Delgado said immediately, stepping inside. "What they did was wrong. But I might have something that can help." She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes filled with barely contained anger. "I've been watching Holt for months, waiting for the right moment." "Watching him do what?" Marcus asked, still wary of any police officer. Delgado reached into her purse and withdrew a small hard drive. "Everything. I've been copying body cam footage to private storage outside the department servers. Footage that conveniently disappears from official records within hours of being uploaded." Angela moved closer, hope flickering across her exhausted face. "What's on there?" "Holt giving direct orders to harass homeowners who won't sell. Illegal searches. False arrests." Delgado's voice shook with controlled fury. "He thinks he's untouchable because he deletes the evidence. But I've got it all, including last night's raid on your house from multiple officers' cameras." Marcus took the hard drive carefully. "Why are you showing us this now?" "Because what they did to you crossed a line even for Holt," Delgado said, pacing the destroyed living room. "Attacking a military family? Destroying service medals? It's going to backfire on him spectacularly." She paused, picking up Angela's scratched Distinguished Service Medal. "I joined the force to protect people, not terrorize them. What Holt's doing isn't law enforcement. It's organized crime with a badge." Angela began connecting the pieces. The developers paying him to clear the neighborhood. Delgado nodded. "Exactly. There's footage of Holt meeting with the developers' representatives behind the old warehouse on Pine Street. The audio is crystal clear, discussing payments, target properties, timeline for acquisition." "Why didn't Internal Affairs act on this?" Marcus demanded. "Because Holt has friends in Internal Affairs," Delgado said bitterly. "They bury complaints, lose evidence, intimidate witnesses. The whole system is corrupted. That's why I started keeping my own copies." She gestured to the hard drive. "But this needs to go higher than local authorities. This is federal-level corruption." Marcus carefully secured the hard drive. "I have contacts in the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, and Military Legal Affairs will be very interested in the destruction of federal service medals." "Be careful who you trust," Delgado warned. "Holt has connections throughout local law enforcement. He'll do anything to stop this evidence from getting out." She moved toward the door, putting her sunglasses back on. "I should go before someone sees me here. But there's one more thing. Check the footage from 3 weeks ago, the Carter interview. It shows Holt explicitly targeting her property." Angela touched the detective's arm. "Thank you. For doing the right thing. Just make it count," Delgado said quietly. "Make sure he can't hurt any more families." She slipped out the door and hurried down the street, constantly checking for surveillance. Marcus immediately pulled out his laptop, hands steady as he connected the hard drive. Years of military operations had taught him to focus on the mission, despite exhaustion. "I'm calling in every favor I've got. Federal investigators, military legal command, civil rights attorneys, everyone." Angela watched over his shoulder as video files appeared on the screen. Dozens of incidents, all carefully labeled and dated. The scope of Holt's corruption sprawled before them in gigabytes of damning evidence. "Look," she pointed to a folder marked Carter Property. Inside was crystal-clear footage of Holt threatening Mrs. Carter in her own home, promising to make her life very difficult if she refused to sell. Marcus's jaw tightened as he watched. This ends now. He pulled out his phone and began making calls, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to coordinating precise operations. "We're going to build an airtight case. Every agency, every violation, every victim." Angela straightened her shoulders, feeling strength return despite her exhaustion. The destroyed house around them no longer felt like defeat. It was evidence of desperation from a corrupt system about to fall. She began gathering documentation of the raid's damage, preparing to face whatever came next. This time, they had what Holt never expected: proof. Irrefutable evidence of his crimes, preserved by someone inside his own department. The truth he'd worked so hard to hide was about to become his downfall. Marcus sat with 2 FBI agents in a small conference room at the federal building downtown. The blinds were drawn tight as they reviewed Detective Delgado's recordings on multiple screens. Agent Sarah Williams paused one video, zooming in on Captain Holt's face as he spoke with a man in an expensive suit behind the Pine Street warehouse. "The developer's paying when the land clears." Holt's voice came through clearly on the enhanced audio. "Just keep the pressure on. Focus on the holdouts, especially that old lady Carter. Make them understand staying isn't worth the hassle." "The quality is exceptional," Agent Williams noted, making detailed timestamps. "Detective Delgado's documentation is meticulous. Multiple angles, clear audio, proper chain of custody records. She knew exactly what we'd need for prosecution." The second agent, David Torres, scrolled through financial records they'd subpoenaed. "We've already traced 6 separate payments from shell companies linked to the developer, all to accounts connected to Holt. He wasn't even trying very hard to hide it." "He thought he was untouchable," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "That's why he got sloppy. Power made him arrogant." They watched more footage showing officers under Holt's command conducting illegal searches, making false arrests, and destroying property during raids. Each incident was carefully catalogued with dates, times, and officer names. "This goes beyond simple corruption," Agent Williams said, shaking her head. "This is organized criminal activity, using police authority as cover. The civil rights violations alone." She trailed off as new footage began playing. The video showed Angela being thrown to the ground during her arrest. Officer Griggs could be heard laughing as he twisted her arm unnecessarily hard. Marcus's hands clenched, but he forced himself to remain professional. "We'll need statements from your neighbors who witnessed the arrest," Agent Torres said. "And Mrs. Carter's testimony about the harassment will be crucial." "I can help coordinate that," Marcus offered. "The neighborhood trusts me more than any law enforcement right now." "Understandably," Agent Williams replied, "but we need to move carefully. If Holt suspects we're building a case, he might destroy evidence or pressure witnesses." They spent hours reviewing more footage and building a precise timeline of events. The case expanded beyond Holt to include several other officers and department officials who had enabled or participated in the corruption. "The U.S. Attorney's Office is drafting warrants right now," Agent Torres explained. "We'll coordinate with military police given the attacks on your home and service medals. This will be a joint operation." Meanwhile, Angela walked slowly down Brookside Street, stopping to talk with concerned neighbors. Mrs. Carter sat with her on her front porch, both women watching other residents peek nervously through windows. "People are scared," Mrs. Carter said softly. "After what they did to your house, everyone's wondering who's next." "It's almost over," Angela assured her, careful not to reveal too much. "Marcus and I aren't backing down. Neither should anyone else." "The developers called again this morning," Mrs. Carter admitted. "Offered even more money. Said it would be easier for everyone if I sold quickly." Her hands trembled slightly as she sipped her tea. Angela covered the older woman's hand with her own. "Don't let them intimidate you. Change is coming. Good change this time." Other neighbors gradually emerged from their homes, drawn by Angela's calm presence. They gathered in small groups, sharing stories of police harassment and pressure to sell. Angela listened carefully, making mental notes of dates and incidents that might help the investigation. "My boy got pulled over 3 times last week," Mr. Washington from 2 doors down said. "No reason given, just harassment." "They went through my trash at night," added Mrs. Lopez. "Left it scattered all over my yard. Said they were conducting an investigation, but wouldn't say of what." Back at the federal building, agents coordinated their planned response. Multiple arrest teams were assembled, each assigned specific targets. Agent Williams spread a map across the table showing key locations. "We move at dawn," she explained to Marcus. "Multiple simultaneous arrests to prevent any suspects from fleeing. Captain Holt's home and office will be our primary targets." "What about Officer Griggs and the others involved in Angela's arrest?" Marcus asked. "Team 3 will handle those arrests," Agent Torres replied. "We have clear footage of excessive force and civil rights violations. They're all named in the warrants." They reviewed contingency plans and emergency protocols. Every detail had to be perfect. The corruption had deep roots. They had to pull it all out at once. "Detective Delgado's safety is also a priority," Agent Williams added. "We have a protection team ready for her. Once the arrests start, Holt's allies might figure out where the evidence came from." Marcus nodded gravely. "She risked everything to expose this. She deserves our protection." The afternoon stretched into evening as final preparations were made. Arrest teams memorized floor plans and entry points. Evidence teams prepared to seize computers and documents. Federal prosecutors stood by to begin immediate processing. "Get some rest," Agent Williams advised Marcus. "Tomorrow will be intense." But Marcus knew sleep would be impossible. He thought of Angela standing firm despite being surrounded by hostile officers. He remembered Delgado's courage in preserving evidence at great personal risk. He pictured Mrs. Carter refusing to be driven from her home. The agents made final radio checks and distributed tactical assignments. Every officer involved in the morning operation received detailed briefings. They all understood the significance. This wasn't just about one corrupt captain, but about restoring trust between law enforcement and the community. As darkness fell, Agent Torres sealed the last warrant packet. "Dawn deployment confirmed. All teams on standby. We move at first light." The rumble of powerful engines cut through the early morning quiet of Brookside Street. Black government SUVs and unmarked sedans rolled in with precise, controlled movements. Nothing like the chaotic police sirens from days before. Their headlights swept across sleepy houses as vehicle after vehicle took strategic positions along the street. Angela and Marcus stood on their front porch, watching the orchestrated arrival unfold. The cool morning air carried whispers between neighbors, who emerged cautiously onto their own porches and driveways. Mrs. Carter appeared on her steps, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes wide as she watched. Agents in dark jackets stepped out of their vehicles with practiced efficiency. The words "federal investigation" reflected boldly across their backs in the rising sun. They moved with quiet purpose, checking radios and positioning themselves at key points along the street. Several nodded respectfully toward Marcus, acknowledging the role he'd played in bringing them here. "It's really happening," Angela whispered, gripping the porch railing. Her knuckles were still bruised from the violent raid on their home. Marcus placed his hand over hers, steady and reassuring. "Justice doesn't always come with sirens and shows of force," he replied softly. "Sometimes it arrives quietly, when the corrupt least expect it." More neighbors gathered outside, forming small clusters along sidewalks. Many held phones, ready to record whatever came next. The atmosphere crackled with tension and anticipation. Even the morning birds seemed to pause their songs, as if sensing the weight of the moment. The relative calm shattered as a police cruiser suddenly roared onto the street, engine revving aggressively. Captain Darren Holt burst out of the driver's seat, his face already flushed with anger. He'd clearly expected to find his officers conducting another intimidation raid. Instead, he froze mid-stride as federal agents stepped forward to meet him. "Captain Darren Holt," Agent Williams announced clearly, holding up her credentials. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have multiple warrants for your arrest." Agent Torres held up a tablet, displaying crystal-clear body cam footage. The sound of Holt's own voice filled the morning air. "Push them out. The developer pays when the land clears." The color drained from Holt's face, replaced quickly by a dangerous rage. "This is my jurisdiction," he snarled, taking an aggressive step forward. "You have no authority here. We have evidence of civil rights violations, corruption, conspiracy, and witness intimidation," Agent Williams continued calmly. "Please place your hands behind your back." Instead, Holt's hand moved toward his service weapon. In that instant, his facade of authority crumbled into pure desperation. He shoved Agent Torres hard, sending the tablet clattering across the pavement. The agent stumbled, but kept his feet as Holt's fingers brushed his holster. 3 agents tackled him before he could draw. Holt went down fighting, swinging wildly and catching one agent with a glancing blow to the jaw. The impact echoed in the sudden silence. Years of unchecked power and corruption exploded into one final, futile struggle. Marcus tensed instinctively, his military training urging him to help subdue the threat. But Angela's firm grip on his arm held him back. This wasn't their fight anymore. The law had to finish what they'd started. "You're done, Holt," Agent Williams said, as her colleagues wrestled him against a vehicle hood. "The evidence is secure. Detective Delgado made sure of that." Holt's eyes went wide at the name. "That woman—" His words cut off as agents slammed him harder against the metal, securing his arms behind his back. More federal vehicles arrived, carrying teams to arrest Holt's corrupt officers. The neighborhood watched in stunned silence as the man who had terrorized them for so long was forced to his knees. Steel handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The same sound that had sealed Angela's fate days before, now delivering poetic justice. Mrs. Carter stepped off her porch, walking slowly toward the scene. Other neighbors followed her lead, gathering along the sidewalks. Some openly wept. Others stood tall, phones recording every moment of Holt's humiliation. The captain's desperate struggles gradually subsided as reality sank in. His power, built on fear and corruption, had finally crumbled. "You can't do this," Holt muttered, but his voice had lost its authority. "I run this street." "Not anymore," Agent Williams replied, nodding to her colleagues to lift him to his feet. "This street belongs to its residents. It always did." Angela and Marcus watched from their porch as federal agents secured the scene. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across Brookside Street. Holt's head hung low as agents led him toward a waiting vehicle, his badge and gun already confiscated. The man who had seemed invincible just days ago now looked small and ordinary in handcuffs. More federal vehicles rolled onto Brookside Street as the morning sun climbed higher. Agent Williams directed her teams with precise efficiency, coordinating arrests at multiple locations. Officer Tyler Griggs fought and cursed as agents pulled him from his patrol car outside the precinct. Other officers, seeing the inevitable, surrendered quietly when federal agents approached with warrants. "Look," Angela said softly, pointing down the street. "There's Sergeant Miller, the one who tore apart our living room." They watched as Miller was led out of his house in handcuffs, still wearing his bathrobe. His wife stood in their doorway, crying and clutching their confused children. Angela felt a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction at seeing justice served, but also sympathy for the innocent family members caught in the aftermath. "He made his choices," Marcus reminded her, sensing her conflict. Every time he followed Holt's illegal orders, he chose power over duty. News vans began arriving, reporters and camera crews spilling onto the sidewalks. They captured footage of federal agents escorting more officers into custody. The same street that had witnessed Angela's humiliation days before now showcased the dismantling of corruption that had plagued the neighborhood for months. Agent Torres approached Angela and Marcus, tablet in hand. "We've documented at least 37 instances of illegal searches and intimidation tactics. The body cam footage Detective Delgado preserved is damning. These arrests are just the beginning." Neighbors gathered in small groups, sharing stories of harassment they'd endured. Mrs. Johnson, from 2 doors down, described how officers had cited her 12 times in 1 month for imaginary code violations after she refused to sell. Mr. Washington, whose garden had been repeatedly vandalized during late-night investigations, stood tall as he watched his tormentors taken away. "The developer's already backing out," Agent Torres continued. "Their legal team contacted us an hour ago, claiming they had no knowledge of Holt's methods. They're desperately trying to distance themselves from the conspiracy." A young reporter approached Angela cautiously. "Mrs. Brooks, would you be willing to share your story? You're the one who stood up to them first." Angela glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "The truth needs to be told," he said. "People need to know what happened here." More neighbors stepped forward as Angela spoke to the reporter. They formed a supportive circle, each adding details about the systematic intimidation they'd faced. The reporter's eyes widened as the full scope of the conspiracy emerged. How Holt had weaponized his authority to serve private interests, using taxpayer-funded resources to bully residents from their homes. "He thought we'd be easy targets," Mr. Washington said firmly. "Working folks, retirees, people who couldn't fight back. But he didn't count on our strength together." Agent Williams returned, her expression serious. "We've seized documents from Holt's office. The money trail is clear. Payments filtered through shell companies, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. The developer was promising him a percentage of every property sale." Another federal vehicle arrived, this one carrying forensic accountants. They headed toward the precinct, ready to dig through years of financial records. The scale of corruption seemed to grow with each passing hour. Mrs. Carter emerged from her house, tears streaming down her face. She walked slowly toward Angela and Marcus, her shoulders shaking with emotion. This was the home she'd shared with her late husband for 40 years, the garden they'd tended together, the porch where they'd watched their grandchildren play. Holt and his corrupt officers had nearly taken it all away. "It's over," Angela said softly, embracing the elderly woman. "They can't hurt us anymore." Neighbors rushed to support Mrs. Carter, forming a protective circle around her. Many had grown up knowing her as a second mother, watching her care for neighborhood children and tend to her famous rose garden. Her strength in refusing to sell had inspired others to stand firm. "I kept hearing Harold's voice," Mrs. Carter whispered, referring to her late husband. "He always said that bullies count on good people staying quiet. But we didn't stay quiet, did we?" "No, ma'am," Marcus replied respectfully. "We certainly didn't." More residents emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion and news coverage. The street that had felt like a war zone days earlier now hummed with community solidarity. People who had previously been afraid to speak to each other now shared hugs and tears of relief. Agent Williams approached with an evidence bag containing Holt's badge and service weapon. "These symbols of authority became tools of oppression," she said grimly. "We'll need statements from everyone about specific incidents. The U.S. Attorney's Office is preparing multiple federal indictments." The morning sun now filled Brookside Street completely, burning away the last shadows. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing aerial footage of the federal operation. Reporters interviewed residents while photographers documented the steady stream of arrested officers being transported away. "I never thought I'd see this day," Mrs. Carter said, wiping her eyes. "I was so scared they'd force me out, erase all our memories here." Angela squeezed her hand. That's what they counted on, our fear. But they forgot that some things are worth fighting for. Marcus watched another patrol car being towed away for evidence processing. They had the badges and guns, he said quietly. But we had the truth. Truth doesn't need weapons to win. The setting sun painted Brookside Street in warm golden light as neighbors carried folding tables and chairs onto their lawns. The aroma of grilled burgers and Mrs. Washington's famous potato salad filled the air. Children darted between groups of adults, their laughter replacing the harsh memory of police sirens. What started as a few residents sharing drinks on their porches had evolved into a full-block party, a celebration of justice and community strength. Angela sat on her front steps, watching elderly Mr. Peterson set up his ancient boombox. Soon, Motown classics drifted through the evening air. Across the street, teenagers helped Mrs. Carter arrange chairs in a circle, treating her with newfound respect after learning how she'd stood her ground against the corrupt officers. "You know what this reminds me of?" Marcus said, settling beside Angela with 2 paper plates loaded with food. "Those neighborhood gatherings my grandmother used to host, when people really knew their neighbors." Angela nodded, accepting a plate. "That's what Holt and his cronies didn't understand. They thought they could divide us, make us too afraid to support each other." A group of neighbors approached, led by Sarah Thompson from 3 doors down. "Angela, we've been talking," Sarah said, clutching a notebook. "We want to start a proper neighborhood watch program. A real one, not like that fake program Holt used to justify harassing people." "That's exactly what we need," Angela replied, sitting up straighter. "Regular meetings, phone trees, documenting any suspicious police activity. We can coordinate with legitimate officers who want to rebuild trust." More residents gathered around as Angela spoke. Marcus watched proudly as his wife naturally assumed the role of community leader. She'd always had this strength, this ability to bring people together. The crisis had simply revealed it to everyone else. "We should connect with other neighborhoods, too," suggested Tom Rodriguez, a retired teacher. "What happened here, it's probably happening elsewhere. People need to know they can fight back legally." The crowd murmured in agreement. Several people held up phones, showing news coverage spreading across social media. The story had gone viral. 10 police cars surrounding one woman, but instead of finding a victim, they'd exposed their own corruption. "Channel 7 wants to interview you tomorrow," Marcus told Angela quietly. And that national news magazine called again. "People are inspired by what happened here." Angela shook her head modestly. "It wasn't just me. Detective Delgado risked her career to preserve evidence. The neighbors who filmed everything. Mrs. Carter refusing to sell no matter how much they pressured her. We all played a part." A cheer erupted from near the Thompsons' house as someone projected news footage onto a white sheet hanging from the porch. The images showed Holt and other officers being led into federal court that afternoon, their faces twisted with rage as reporters shouted questions. "Look at them now," Mr. Washington called out. "Not so tough without their badges and guns, are they?" Kids stopped playing to watch the footage, and parents used the moment to teach an important lesson about standing up to bullies with truth and courage rather than force. The impromptu party continued as darkness fell. String lights twinkled from several porches, and the Rodriguez family brought out their guitars for an impromptu concert. Angela moved through the crowd, listening to stories she hadn't heard before. Tales of intimidation and resistance that people had been too frightened to share. "They gave my grandson a ticket for riding his bike on the sidewalk," Mrs. Martinez revealed, her voice shaking. "Then another for riding it in the street. We couldn't afford the fines, so they said they'd drop them if we sold our house to the developer." Each story strengthened Angela's resolve to prevent similar abuses. She gathered names and details, planning to share everything with federal investigators. The pattern of corruption needed to be fully exposed. Marcus brought her a fresh drink and squeezed her shoulder supportively. "You've started something bigger than Brookside Street," he said. "People are watching, learning that they don't have to accept abuse of power." Near Mrs. Carter's rose garden, a group of residents had set up a table with laptops. They were creating a neighborhood website and social media presence to document their story and connect with other communities facing similar struggles. "We're scheduling a community meeting for next week," Sarah announced, holding up her notebook. "Legal aid representatives want to help us understand our rights, and some good police officers from the next precinct over offered to attend to rebuild trust." The music shifted to something slower, and couples began dancing in the street. Angela watched young and old, different races and backgrounds, all celebrating together. This was what community meant, not living in fear of authority, but supporting each other against injustice. "Remember when they surrounded you right here?" Marcus asked softly, gesturing to the spot where Angela had faced down 10 police cars. "I'll never forget it," she replied. "But look at this street now. Where days ago there had been threatening police lights and shouted commands, children now played tag between tables of food. Where Holt had tried to intimidate residents into silence, people now spoke freely, sharing hopes for their neighborhood's future. The same pavement, where Angela had been forced to her knees, now supported dancing feet and celebration. A small group gathered around Mrs. Carter as she told stories about the neighborhood's history, her voice strong and clear. No longer afraid, she described how her late husband had helped build many of these houses decades ago, creating the community that had just proved its worth. The evening air filled with conversation and laughter, drowning out the last echoes of sirens in everyone's memories. Trust that had been shattered by corrupt officers began to rebuild, not through force or fear, but through shared strength and determination. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.